So welcome everyone to Philly Net Tuesday. We'll have a big crowd. I think we're going to have some more people drifting in. How many people, is this the first time they've come to Net Tuesday? Okay. Well, then you won't be as bored by this introduction that I go through every time, but we'll do it quickly. So basically there are NetSquared affiliates around the world. They do something usually around the same sort of theme of nonprofit or social change support, with, especially from the social aspect of technology. With us, we tend to think of using the social web for social change as our general theme, and provide different kinds of programs, primarily through Net Tuesdays, the first Tuesday of every month, except on a month like this where the first Tuesday was a holiday, and on some sort of aspect that might be of interest to people that resonate with that theme. We also have a planning meeting, which is by telephone conference call, on the second Tuesday next week, and people are invited to participate in that and help plan for future events. See me if you want to access instructions for that. We have a website that contains some information about the events themselves, as well as some of the follow-up information and recordings, and a Google group that does what Google groups do, and people tend to use that for announcements, questions, and other sorts of things that they think that the rest of the community might be helpful or might want to know about. If we look back over the year, and this conveniently is the last, actually 2012, you can see the kind of programs that we've done. Most of them are on a particular sort of topic that was chosen for that month. Now you'll notice that some of these, the ones that are highlighted here, are a recurring theme that we call crowdsourcing change, and that's when we bring in a couple of local nonprofits who talk about their website and their use, particularly of social web technology, and then the crowd, which is everyone who shows up, provides some feedback to them in a structured dialogue. And we're going to be doing that next month. That's coming up. And if anyone is either interested for their own nonprofit, or if they know of a nonprofit they think might benefit from that sort of scrutiny and attention, then they should contact Denny, who is going to be moderating that and putting it together. So please feel free to suggest ideas. And even if it's not for next month, we do this, as you see, 3 or 4 times a year. And we might do it on a future month for someone. I mentioned that we also have a planning call, which will be next week, and it'll be at 6 p.m., so you can come for that. In addition to the Net Tuesdays, a lot of our focus is about networking. So we try and encourage that in a number of ways. We have a sign-in sheet, so please sign yourself in. Try and make it legible, please. And what I'll do is I'll take that information of your name and your contact information and redistribute it back out only to the members, only to the people who are here. And the same thing with your business cards. If you leave a business card, we'll scan that and send it back out to the attendees, so you don't have to waste your business cards exchanging with everyone, and you can kind of have an opportunity to reconnect with people that you met here. Most people are wearing a tag, which is a name tag and also a way of tagging yourself with some other information, and that's kind of a means for an icebreaker, a way of breaking into a conversation with someone. And there's we have a tendency to try and be friendly and informal with one another, so feel free to speak to people. And we also have a no questions too stupid policy that is strictly enforced. So you can try and test the limits of it. So far, it's not been broken. A little bit of housekeeping. There's some food over there. Please eat it, because we don't want to leave anything that's left. This building does do composting, and all of the food itself is in fact compostable, even the meat and cheese. We have Wi-Fi access if you're interested. It's just open access. It'll be labeled AFSC wireless, and there's no password for it. We are recording this event, and we'll be putting a recording of that up on the website. If you don't want to be recorded, actually right now the audience will not be recorded because that camera is broken, and only that camera is working. So that won't be the case. And if it miraculously comes to pass that it's working again, then we usually designate that corner as our video-free zone. In addition, we'll be passing around microphones for the audience to use. And keep in mind, that's not so that you can hear one another in the room, but it's so that the recording is more audible. And also, besides the recording, we're actually streaming this live so that folks who are not in this room, either physically or temporarily, will be able to hear if you use the microphone. If you parked in the lot across 15th Street and get your parking ticket validated at the front desk here, it'll be $10 parking, which sounds a little expensive, but it's a lot less than it would be if you didn't have it validated. And everyone is invited to come out for a drink or a bite afterwards and continue the conversation in a less formal setting than this, not that this is so formal. Our sponsor is the American Friends Service Committee, which is one of the tenants of this building, and AFSC is an international NGO that has peace and social justice programs around the world. And that's essentially the spiel. What we're going to do now is we're going to just do some quick introductions of ourselves. And you don't have to do anything. If you want to say your name, that would be great. We'd also like to ask if you would, if optionally, if you want to say something about your relationship to the mobile web, so to speak. You know, are you a user? Do you have a website that you want to try and make into more mobile friendly? Are you a developer that does this for other people? That kind of stuff. So we can have a sense, and our presenters can have a sense of who is actually in the audience. And another question, optionally, is that if you can think of a specific instance when you've tried to access the web on a mobile device and it's either been a positive experience or a pain in the ass or anything in between that you think is noteworthy and you want to share. So I'll be passing on this microphone. My name is Seth Horowitz. I work here at the American Friends Service Committee in the area of knowledge management in the IT department. And my negative experience is that one of the things I mentioned before is we have a Google group, and I often get notices of people who are trying to subscribe to the Google group and stuff like that. And I would say about 60% of the time it works like a charm. I can just go directly on my mobile phone and approve these people, and then sometimes it just doesn't work right. It's inconsistent. And I find the inconsistency more troubling than consistently not working. But that's my experience. So let's pass it around. We can start with Stan.
Hi, I'm Stan Pockris. I'm Director of Nonprofit Technology Resources. And all I can say right now is that we're thinking about a new website called Community Magic. So think about that.
Hi, I'm John. I'm a database consultant branching out into mobile. And I have one really positive mobile experience, trapped on 95 after some traffic disasters, finding alternate routes and using the Google traffic map to get out of hell.
Hi, I'm Eve Goldhirsch. I'm a user experience researcher. I work for ADP. I'm a mobile web user.
Hi, I'm Aaron. I work with a group called Energy Justice, an environmental organization. I don't even have a laptop. But I may need to convert the websites that I'm developing for mobile users, so I'm interested in that.
Hi, my name is Neil. My background's in transportation policy technology, but I'm interested in branching off into some startup ideas and interested in learning how to develop for mobile apps.
I usually go last. I'm Steve Lubetkin, Podcast Steve on Twitter. I help with the live stream, with the switching, and I help organizations produce audio and video for the web to tell their story in documentary style.
Hi, I'm Gloria Bell. I'm the operations manager at O3 World and help run the local chapter of Social Media Club. My relationship to mobile web usage is constant. I think I've been told that my phone is permanently attached to me.
I'm Nancy Massey. I've been building accessible websites for a really long time, and everybody uses mobile twice.
I'm Madar Gable. I'm the new executive director of an old 45-year-old nonprofit peace and social action organization that needs both a
website that is brought into the 21st century, which means that it ought to be have some mobile web usage as well. So I'm here to learn what I can.
What's your organization?
It's Pachamenteras, Peace on Earth. It's a Delaware, Wilmington-based organization.
I'm Brianna Morgan from the Office of HIV Planning, which is poorly maintained, but sometimes memorable. And I am the website coordinator there, and our challenge is that we're trying to design for some people who are accessing our information on mobile devices and some people that are using Internet Explorer on public access computers. So it's a little bit difficult.
Hi, I'm Denny Casrell, and I work for a nonprofit health insurance company here in Philadelphia called Health Partners. And we are actually right in the process of planning to overhaul our website using a responsive design. And as far as a positive experience, I love Shazam, if everyone, I don't know if you know what that is, but that's a beautiful thing. If you don't know what a song is, you just hold it up and it will tell you what the song is and who's singing it. And this is invaluable when you are with groups of people and everyone is trying to figure out who's singing the song that you're hearing.
What's it called?
Shazam.
Hi, my name is Jim Worster. I work for BNY Mellon as a software engineer, but I also volunteer a lot building people's and organizations' websites for free. And lately, when they're built from scratch, you can make them much more responsive and accessible on mobile devices. But if somebody already has one, it's really a pain in the ass to try to get it to become responsive.
Hi, everybody. I'm Andy Sharp, a freelance writer for the nonprofit news website Generosity. And I would probably say, I use my iPhone all the time. Probably a negative experience is whenever I'm on Facebook on my iPhone and my posts always mysteriously disappear. So.
Hi, I'm Andrew Bergen. I'm a student at Drexel University, and I'm a mobile user and also kind of messing around trying to learn how to do my own mobile development.
I'm Jonathan Kreiner. I manage marketing for Solve Media, Center City based, and we're coming out with a mobile product, and so I just wanted to learn a bit more.
Hi, Mitch Collier. I do, our firm does consulting for the federal government, helping out with health communications and policy analysis and that sort of thing, including website development.
Hi, my name's Mark Revez. I'm a technical writer for a company called Draeger, which makes medical equipment. We're also doing finally doing a full-scale software suite, mostly for the OR and critical care areas. And we find that our customers want the technical information on whatever device, iPad, tablets, phones, and sometimes they even want a good old PDF to print out.
Hi, my name's Julia. I'm with the company Citrix. We create websites and we make them mobile friendly. And I personally am super annoyed anytime I'm on a mobile website and it takes more than 3 seconds to load.
Hi, I'm Meg Lewis. I work at Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine, and I also work for NAMI, which serves the underserved population. And in both cases, we're looking to emphasize our websites and go mobile, but it's very difficult with a library because there are databases and ebooks that just don't convert well. So I'm interested in finding out more about how these things work. Thank you.
I'm Jerry Simoes. I'm with Veterans for Peace. I'd like more tools of communication.
I'm Meg Newberger. I'm an independent designer, and I just want to learn as much as I can.
Bob McLeod. I'm an independent developer and designer with a strong interest in work with political, environmental, and social organizations. Preferred politics falling in the pale pink to barn red.
Hi, my name is Andrew Sather. I work at Jenkins Law Library. We're an independent library performing legal services for the community and for the law firms. And I'm interested in this topic because actually this year we are planning a large responsive design project for our website, which we rolled out 2 years ago without any thought of mobile. So I'm really excited about hearing more about this and hearing about how all of our efforts were wasted 2 years ago.
Hi, I'm Steve Sontag. I work for a communications and marketing and web firm called Mighty Engine, and we do a lot of work with nonprofits and building responsive websites and those kind of things. I'm on mobile devices all day long, and I hate when individual websites don't render properly across different platforms, whether a tablet or a phone. They look different, and the user experience is different. And I'm also really annoyed now when I go to any website that doesn't have a sort of a responsive element to it, so that it's pinching and zooming it all the time to read all the content on the site.
What he said. I'm Kimberly Imperial, Communications Director for the Philadelphia Education Fund, and I am here for an aha moment so that I can convince our staff that we need to put more resources into mobile and bring us out of the dark ages.
I mean, I'm just going to listen.
My name is Louise Salinas, and I work for a Quaker organization in this building called Friends World Committee for Consultation. And we're getting ready to redo our website in this year, and so I think it should be mobile friendly. And about a user experience, I really like it. I think it's what you said at the end, that when the content fits the screen of my Android phone, because when I have to scroll back and forth, it really annoys me.
More than I feel it's essential that we satisfy what our customers want. So we should definitely, this should be essential.
What was your name?
Hi, I'm Brandon Marsh. I'm a web designer at Voice Systems Engineering, and we are currently taking on the major task of converting all of our websites to responsive design. So it's we have about 4 sites that we're going to all convert. It's a huge task, and I want to get rid of every single mobile app out there and make every website just cross-browser friendly and device friendly.
Hello, my name is Asya Girjan. I'm actually a dental student, and as I begin to think a little bit more about dental practice, web design, and mobile web interface seems to be interesting, so I'm here to learn a little bit about that. And of course, as a young student, always using web. So.
Hi, I'm Doug Bard. I'm the founder of Kitchen Cred. We're an informal educational program that teaches kids nutrition knowledge and kitchen competency and encourages them in the culinary competition. We're fairly new and we're getting ready to roll out, and here's the good news, for the first time, our website. And we're also thinking about creating a mobile app that's going to be an educational game to support the rest of the in-kitchen teaching experience. So I'm hoping to find out what not to do wrong tonight. In terms of experiences with mobile, I have a small pet peeve. I use my Android phone a lot to access news feeds, and I noticed that some of them, once I've resized them once, they stay that way, but other ones go back to that itty-bitty little typeface and have to be pinched all the time. And I'd like to see that go away.
Hi, I'm Faye Anderson. I am about to launch a project, Philly Fresh Start Project, to promote interest in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math among underrepresented minorities. So hope the website, phillyfreshstart.me, will be mobile friendly, and you can sign up to see for yourself. It's Philly Fresh, PHRESH, start.me. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mike Stupna, freelance web developer. It's always an interesting challenge to make websites that are cross-browser compatible and now mobile compatible. I'm always learning more about that.
Hi, my name is Paul Matheson. I run a 22-year-old consulting firm, pjmatheson.com. Check us out. I serve on various nonprofit boards and always interested how we can make websites more mobile friendly. My only thought is something not relevant to this maybe so much, but folks in the audience here, I'm about 3/4 of the way through the Steve Jobs book by Isaacson. I'm sure some of you have read it, but it is a jaw dropper. I'd recommend it. It's proof that you can be crazy and successful. It's just a great book.
Hi, I'm Ryan Draving, and I run Compete Leap, which is a internet marketing company that serves dentists, and our new brand Referable, which is an internet marketing company that serves local businesses in general, and we help them get more exposure online and new patients. I guess I'm going to be the Antichrist tonight and say that I find 95% of responsive implementations to be garbage and a total waste of user experience time. Mainly because, for example, on my way over here, I looked up alltop.com, which is a very popular news site that aggregates content from across the web. And I pulled it up, and it's got this neat little, in this case, it's just a mobile website, but it eliminates the majority of the content that I care about and broke the user experience for me so that I couldn't access the content that I wanted in the way that I used to. I've had similar experiences with responsive design sites and actually have a website which is responsive compatible and functions perfectly well as a responsive website, and I do not enable that function.
My name's Anne Maley. I'm just getting started with programming and web design. Hopefully trying to start my own website or startup at some point, but for the time being, just getting involved with the company that I work for to hopefully help them with their website a little bit, which is currently, I would say, 100% absolutely not in any way web responsive or mobile responsive, and I don't think it could be accessed by any mobile device, so hopefully that will be something that they'll be working on.
Guess who hasn't had a chance to introduce themselves?
I'm Dan Arbor. I work for Comcast Spectacor, known mostly for owning the flyers, so don't hate me. I am a systems guy there, so part of what I do is maintain the website for Wells Fargo, CenterPhilly.com, the premium sites. We're converting some into a responsive site now. Others that we're doing, my main reason for here is just to get a feel for how non-developers view them, what they think is important, what they find value in or no value in. As for experiences, mostly I have a negative one in going to my own sites because we haven't converted them over yet. Some of them are still Flash-based, which is probably the worst thing as an iPhone user.
Again, putting on the spot folks who just walked in.
Hi, Mike Fagans, philstories.org. I collect stories and put them on the web.
Hi, my name is Mills, as in windmills. I run two websites. One, I highly recommend it. It's freeselfhelp.org. That's freeselfhelp.org. The other one is a conflict resolution website, but that's in progress.
Are you coming in?
Hello, Viv Hawkins. Interested in what you got going on here.
Lola George.
Okay. A couple of things before we get started. I'd forgotten to mention, because I didn't put the slide in there, I mentioned that we are streaming this live, and people can get to that. We will have some participation. I don't know if we do. Looks like we do have a little bit already. But also we're supporting a Twitter back channel so that either from within this room or from remotely, people may make a comment or ask a question with the hashtag of PHLNET2. And Andrew back there, besides for ably greeting people, is also monitoring the Twitter back channel and would represent questions or comments that come from cyberspace into the room here. We are, as I mentioned before, we're very informal, so we have food there. Get up during the presentation and just go get some food, go to the bathroom. If you'd like to look over Andrew's shoulder and see the the Twitter stream. If that's of interest to you, please go ahead and do so, or look over Steve's shoulder and see what's happening with the stream. That's fine too. Our plan for tonight is we're going to first have the panelists introduce themselves and just introduce very briefly what they're going to be talking about. And then we'll have the first panelist will talk about his topic. I'm going to try and minimize questions during the actual presentation. And then we'll have some Q&A specifically about what was talked about by the first panelist. We'll do the same thing with the second panelist, the same thing with the third panelist, and then have time for general Q&A after all three. So that's the general plan of things. And I think we're ready to get started, and we'll start with Reed.
Good evening. That's great to see this big crowd here. What I'm going to be speaking about tonight may give some ammunition to the people that need to convince their organization that mobile is a good idea, worth resources, worth going for that grant or whatever you have to do to get the money to do it. I know that's sometimes hard. I'm going to be hitting some of the highlights in a wonderful book by Lou Wroblewski, I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, called Mobile First. This is a fantastic book, and it is much richer in content, examples, and resources than I can possibly cover in 15 minutes. So I'm going to recommend that you go out and get it. You can download the ebook from their publisher for $9, so not much barrier there. And I think the paperback is only 18, so a pretty good thing to get. Do you want me to just start? I'll just go.
Now, why don't we just go? What are you going to talk about?
I say the book.
Okay, that covers it. Okay. Mike?
All right. My name is Mike Tedeschi. I'm a UI UX designer for the company Xavia here in Philadelphia. I'm also better. All right. I also own a small independent consultancy that focuses on web and mobile applications called Interactive Mechanics. I'm going to be focusing primarily on some of the differences between responsive or adaptive websites and mobile web applications. I'm also going to be showing some examples of some websites and showing a little bit how content flows or changes as you go to different screen sizes.
My name is Robby Perdue. I'm clearly outmatched up here. I'm the least talented guy in the room, but I work for a company called O3 World. We're an interactive agency. We design and develop websites with a focus on mobile and e-commerce solutions. I'm going to be talking about actually implementing the solutions that these guys are going to address over the course of the discussion and give you hopefully a little bit more ammo and maybe a few words of caution as well. I happen to agree with some of you in the audience that responsive in particular is not always the most appropriate option. So we'll kind of end on a bit of a counterpoint. So that should be fun.
Okay. Before we begin, maybe you're going to cover this, Reed, but we've talked about responsive websites. Do we have a definition of that? We can just make sure it's on the table here. What is a responsive website?
I think of a responsive website as one that provides an appropriate user experience regardless of the platform that you're viewing it on, whether it's a phone, a tablet, one of the great big wonderful screens you can get now, or any of the other devices that may be developed in the next few years. Right now we think of a tablet as something like an iPad or an iPad clone, but who knows what will be coming out.
Thank you, Reed. Okay, you're on.
Okay, well, my name is Reed Gusto. I have a company which consists of me called Delta Angel, and there's the contact information. I make WordPress websites, and I offer instruction in WordPress. This is the book that I'm going to be discussing as much as I can tonight. It's a wonderful book, and when we're done, I'll show you this information again if you need it, so you don't feel like you have to write it down this second. Not so long ago, especially in internet terms, mobile websites were just not in the picture. I mean, and there was a very good reason for it. You all remember the candy bar phones with a little 120 pixel square screen, and we were all paying for every download, and it was black and white and kind of lousy network speeds, and it was just a joke, really. It was sort of a novelty. But now, obviously, the picture is very different, and there are a million statistics about the growth of mobile that I could show you, but just to pick two that struck me in particular. The combined shipments of desktops, laptops, notebooks in the last quarter of 2010 were surpassed by smartphone shipments, and that's 2 years before that they thought that was going to happen. And the traffic grew 600% in a year in 2010 after tripling the prior year. These are just phenomenal numbers. What changed? How did we get there? I mean, from 2007 till now. Well, you may remember that this is the day that they announced the iPhone, and that remarkably changed everything. It really was a big deal, and maybe it was worth standing in line around the Apple store. I didn't do that, but a lot of people did. And all of a sudden, you could experience the web and browsing the web in a very nice way. You could see a full-blown browser. You could really actually look at it. No, it's not as the websites weren't responsive or mobile friendly, but you at least had some shot at doing it other than this little tiny candy bar phone. It was sort of a joke. Mobile speeds, the network is being built out. Mobile traffic is expected to increase 26-fold in the 5-year period up there. And the networks are being built out to accommodate that. You see the incredible proliferation of devices that manufacturers are producing and all of the content that's aimed at mobile users. So the bottom line is you really can't afford to ignore this. This is there. This is the world. And all you have to do is look at some of these numbers, and there are lots of other examples in the author's book. So you think about, well, okay, but it's still a small screen. I mean, even if it says this beautiful retina display, and it's nice and carried around and all that, it's little. And, how am I going to get all that information on my website, which is rich in content, and I want to provide every piece of information on the planet to my users? And if we look at the example of Southwest Airlines, everybody loves Southwest, right? Look at all this information. I mean, there's a lot going on here, right? We have these drop-down menus, and oh my God, how am I going to get that? There's no way I'm going to cram that onto an iPhone, right? No. The answer is you are not going to cram that onto an iPhone, and they didn't. What they did was come up with this. A small, elegant design with a lot of focus to it. You can click any of these buttons and get to exactly the content that you're interested in and not be bothered with a lot of fluff. And if you're, trying to check things in a rush for a last-minute flight, you know how important that can be. So Southwest did a decent job. If you look at the site today, it may look a little different. This is an illustration from a book. But this is how Southwest implemented a mobile strategy. And the key is to focus on what really matters the most. And this is the approach, the high-level approach you have to take. You have to think about what your people, your audience, your subscribers or users or whatever they are to you want, and know what your business offers to them that can be distilled into the critical points. That's something you really have to think about rather than throwing them this whole raft of information. The author, Robluski, says, if you design for mobile first, you get agreement. Your organization has to go through this process of creating agreement on what matters the most. And, it sounds very simple and so forth. Well, wait till you sit down with the folks and actually decide. It won't be that simple. And once you've got that, the question comes up is, all right, this is great for the mobile site. Why should the priorities of what's important change just because all of a sudden you now have a little more real estate on a laptop? It really makes you focus on what the organization is trying to communicate. It's almost an organizational process as well as design. Context of use is really important. When you're sitting at home with a laptop or a desktop, and I'm sitting here and I'm working, your seating and everything is sort of makes you focus on the device pretty exclusively. You don't have to worry about your data plan or your minutes or anything else, and you've got a persistent power supply and all that. With a mobile device, you're kind of in this one eye, one thumb mode, which is sort of halfway paying attention. Maybe you're in line at the supermarket and you're kind of, playing around and saying, oh, that's Facebook, this and that, I'll send a little tweet here. And you're looking up to see whether your order is ready or whatever. So it's a whole different focus and context, and that context of use is very important. And you might think, well, our organization, we're not the kind of organization that presents itself on mobile. People sit down at a computer and they go through our site like this. No, that's not what happens. People take their smartphones home, and even if they own a laptop or a laptop and a desktop, they use their mobile phones, mobile devices, all over the place. They use them at home, during downtime, while they're shopping. They use them wherever. And here's another 47% number to think about. They use them during their commute. We hope they're not actually driving while they do it. But the point is, they don't put aside their smartphone when they get home or to the office. So the fact that they have a laptop doesn't mean that's what they're primarily going to use to look at your website. We talked a little bit about constraints of the small screen. There are also capabilities of mobile devices that you really want to take advantage of. Some of them are here and some are coming. Location detection is a big deal. Not only could this be, I have a real hankering for Thai food, where's the nearest restaurant, but maybe it's, I have a real need for the police station, where is it? Or, God forbid, where's the nearest emergency room? These are things that could really matter and which people will instinctively want to know. And then there's the traffic and weather and so forth. The ability to change the orientation of the screen just by tilting it because it has an accelerometer, swiping through content very quickly. Other capabilities, some of these are here, and you're familiar with them. Some of them are on the last iteration of devices or we're not on and will be on the next one. We already have 2 cameras. Video and image, this is putting something into the device and doing something with it. Other things, proximity detection, detect when objects are near you when you might not know that for whatever reason. Ambient light detection. And near-field communication with those RFID readers, those little devices that they put into products to make sure you can't walk out of the store without paying for them. And also for warehousing purposes, if you zip down the aisle of the warehouse, boop, 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 you can count them just by waiting the thing there. These are all capabilities that are coming. And what are people doing with their mobile devices? And I don't want to say phones. Generally 4 categories of things. They're looking things up, finding them, or they're just playing around. They're bored. They want to do some exploring. Checking in with status. Let's see if she's still going out with so-and-so. Editing or creating, texting, emails, uploading pictures, Instagram, all that sort of thing and more. And while they're doing these things, they really want quick access to information and the resources that you're offering them. They don't want your whole site map. They don't want to see that Southwest Airlines, the full site. This will just get them right off the track. They don't want that raft of site navigation options. ESPN does a very good job with their mobile implementation. You've got the big story here. If you want it, there's a video here. You can hit that, and here's your menu, and it takes you right to the other options. Clean, uncluttered. ESPN has generally done a pretty good job with their website. It does what's called degrading gracefully. It translates very well. They've been doing that for a while. Because maintaining clarity and focus is the key thing when people are in that one eyeball or one thumb operating mode. And you want to make it easy for them to carry out what they want to do. Some people mentioned it really irritates me if I have to wait more than 0.8 seconds. I think somebody said 3 seconds to do something. Well, that really does matter. So when you give them something like this email screen, that's pretty clean and that's pretty easy to do, and that's what you want. And a good simple design, once you're focused on that simple, clean, useful, mobile-friendly design, it's going to help you with the main site or the standard site, whatever you want to call it, the one that's enabled for the desktop. What we're getting away from now is windows, icons, menus, and pointers, sometimes called WIMP in design language, towards natural user interface principles. You make the content the user interface, and people do interact with the actual content. People put their hands on the content and move it around and swipe it and push little things on it and so forth. And the more you can reduce the visuals that are not content, the better off you are. The other thing you want to be careful of is not making your website a dumbed-down version, your mobile site, a dumbed-down version of what you might think of as your real site. It's not like that. This is a real opportunity. Remember, they're carrying this thing around with them all the time. They take it to bed with them practically, maybe not even metaphorically. And so give them the opportunity to interact with you, which is what you want. You want them to talk to you, subscribe to your newsletter, give you feedback, use your information. And so you want to make their inputs easy to do in that design. And the book does have lots and lots of examples. There simply isn't time to show you. People want to comment. People want to talk. And they want this so much that back when phones required you to hit the T 3 times to make it an R and an S, remember having to do that? Well, people fought their way through that lousy keyboard in order to talk to one another with a text. And they'll think of, you can make it much easier than that for them. So you want to do that. I'm going to end with a couple of examples from the book of sites that implement this sort of thing rather well. Flickr is one. Kayak, the reservation site for hotels, airlines, and so forth. Kayak does something called smart defaults. You'll notice there's a 1 in the rooms and 1 in the guests. You never rent 0 rooms, right? You never have 0 guests. So, most people want 1 room for 1 guest. And so you can take away some work from half the people just by putting a 1 there. So that kind of, if you think about what you're likely to see, that's a good smart default. Basecamp is a project management tool. It's a web-hosted tool that does a pretty good job with this. And YouTube, the very popular video sharing site also. It looks a little different than this example. This is the menu, and it looks a little bit different today. But even if you didn't know what it was, you'd probably click on it because there's nothing else to do here. So YouTube does a pretty good example. Here is the book, and I would be open to any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Reed. Okay, as I mentioned, because we're informal, I wanted to get a couple of volunteers who could run the mics. We have 2 mobile mics, and we wanted to try and make sure that we can get them into people's hands. So if we have a couple of volunteers, you have the extra advantage of having to hold the mic and therefore can ask your question without having to butt your way in. So a couple of people could volunteer. That's this one. What else, Ryan? Okay, so any questions for Reed about what he presented about why this is all important and useful and we should get involved in it? Menard?
It sounds like from what you just said that if you were to start from scratch right now to do a website for an organization, you wouldn't do the website, you'd do the mobile app first and then do the website. Is that true?
Not exactly. The book was called Mobile First, meaning design the mobile website first. The book's emphasis is on websites, not apps. The distinction being the apps are those little programs that you can download. They're very focused on one thing. Some of them are games and so forth. But what the book is focused on, and what I was, I guess, advocating through this, is that what you're making is a website, not one of those little apps. And there are various reasons. Apps. And these fellows can probably talk to this a little more in more deeper terms, but apps have to be written for the platform. So you need an app written in, I think it's Objective-C for an iPhone and another language for the Android phone and yet something else for the Windows phone. And developers are not cheap, and you have to keep maintaining these things. So apps are a lot more expensive and more complex to implement than mobile-friendly websites. Does that answer your question? Yes, I would start with mobile websites first.
Who has the mic over here?
Just one other thing to add to that. The whole concept too of mobile first isn't just that you build a full mobile website first and then you think entirely about the desktop version. It's a whole way of thinking. You're thinking about what is the experience like on the mobile device. What's the best way to use it? What content needs to be available to mobile users? It's kind of a way of thinking, and less about like a streamlined process of building 1, 2, 3. It's kind of more about the whole process of creating websites that are most easily used on these different devices.
Yeah, and in fact, I'm going to jump in just real quick here as well. More and more. Actually, these same folks, those of you that are developers or designers in the audience, probably familiar with Luke and Zeldman and Ethan Marcotte and some of these other guys that a few years ago were kind of leading the charge on mobile first. More and more you're hearing the discourse shift to just being experience first or customer first, because you don't want to build something, as Reed and Mike both said, you don't want to end up with something that is stripped down, something that's pared down and really kind of remedial and doesn't give a good experience on mobile just because you started with mobile. You're looking to create experiences that are going to scale effectively to any device if we're talking responsive specifically. But in some cases, that might be a dedicated mobile experience, whether that's a website or an app and then a separate desktop site. But we'll get to that a little bit later. But certainly, you don't want to just start with mobile and then do desktop separately, as these guys said. It's always thinking holistically about what your consumers or your clients or whomever your target is, how they're going to interact with the information.
If I could just throw one other thing. If you go there and look for this book on A Book Apart, you'll see Responsive Design by Ethan Marcotte, the person that was just mentioned. And that is also an excellent book to read to get a handle on some of this stuff. And one of the other uses of the book is to give you a lot of terminology and concepts that you might be talking about, you will be talking about with the designers or developers that you hire to work on this site with you. So when they start talking about something, it doesn't sound like the foreign car mechanic talking about your fuel injection system, and you're totally lost. It's actually quite accessible to non-technical people as well.
Tony?
Yeah, I actually have a two-part question, but that's related. One is, and as I said, because my company, we're going through this process right now with our group, and one is, just how do you convince people who are used to having everything, not through the kitchen sink, but a lot on the website, any tips or anything in terms of how are you going to distill it to say this is what's most important. And then number two is, sometimes when you're on your mobile phone, your needs or the tasks that you might want to do, the priority may be somewhat different than if you're doing, the desktop site. So depending on what kind of company or business or whatever product or service you're offering, it may differ. So just because it's like a prioritization thing, on the mobile versus desktop, or just, does he, get into that at all?
Yes. Do you have my notes in front of you? Do you have my presentation notes right in front of you? Are you reading off of them?
Oh.
Is that...
We didn't want to tell you. Figured we like.
No, please go ahead. No, we'll dig into it more later.
What I'll say about it is that the process of getting to the design of the mobile and the standard site, however you're going to create these things, is probably going to be the most complex part, because you probably have never done anything. That's not necessarily true. You may not have done anything like that before. When you're thinking about the site, that's sort of, that's what the techie people do. This is going to have to involve an awful lot of people in the organization who would be able to speak to what is a priority. You can have everything you want there. It's a question of how it's presented and what it looks like and what the navigation, the first things that people see, and it is tricky to get to a system that can let people get to everything they need to get to, even if it's not one of the first four things that you think are the most important thing to do. And the sites won't look the same on all platforms. They'll just look appropriate. So, I think this is going to vary from organization to organization and complexity to complexity. But if you go to thebostonglobe.com, this is a major newspaper, and it's got everything you could think of in it, and it looks terrific on all the devices you can imagine. And yet it has the kitchen sink. So it can be done. It took them quite a while and cost them a pretty penny, I'm sure. But
I think we'll be talking more about that as we go on.
Sorry.
Stephen, you had a question?
Yeah, for Reed, you said in your intro that you develop primarily in WordPress
Yes.
sites. I'm just curious what you think, as a WordPress developer, what you think of the raft of templates that are coming out that at least claim they're responsive friendly, and what you think of the user experience that comes out of those.
I can't say I have a terrific amount of experience with them. A lot of them are very new, and I haven't had. I'm only, I'm a one-person firm, so. But some of them are very good. Some of the ones that, not to put brands on things. Studio Press has brought out some that actually are responsive. One or two of them, they didn't look as good to me as their ads said they were when I tried a little test site. The WordPress 2012 theme right out of the box is responsive. If you don't fool with it too much, and that's a mistake I made on my own site, which I shouldn't have told you, but you can make it a little less responsive than it was if you try to add certain things to it. But yeah, WordPress is very amenable to that sort of thing, and I think those frameworks are getting there. Not all of them are there yet.
Do you think that's an appropriate workaround for some non-professional developers that may need access to these kinds of things? Sure, especially if it's not too much, but sure.
Okay, good. Other questions specifically for Reeds?
Is there a limit of how many levels, like in a navigational tree on a mobile site, you should have? Like you're talking about the Boston Globe site and how it had everything in the kitchen sink, that you think the users on a mobile site might just get too confused? If you think of like the magic number 7 plus or 2 or plus or minus 2, and then on a mobile site, is there too many levels where you will lose the effectiveness?
I am not a designer per se, and that kind of question is kind of intuitive, I think. I think I would defer to these guys on the magic numbers and so forth. So.
Actually, one of the things that Luke mentions in the book is to really focus on the content and less about the navigation.
It's true.
You'll see a lot of the time that navigation actually is completely secondary on a lot of responsive or mobile websites, mainly because the content is the primary focus. And instead of having a long list of links or different resources, you can kind of hide that and make it secondary instead of having it up front.
Yeah, he did make the point that the trend is and should be away from menus per se, and as interact directly with the content, and I guess that might moot out a number of questions.
Okay, let's take one or two more questions before we move on. Kimberly?
Magic numbers. I know we don't like to talk about money, but what, for someone who hasn't assessed the cost of this yet, what is a reasonable range of cost to make your web
a reasonable range?
Really friendly?
Should we all just like write a number on a piece of paper?
How many people are in this room?
Yeah.
I can answer.
Yes, go ahead.
However much it costs to make the site in the first place, or less.
Well, I'm sorry.
What, say that again?
Oh, the cost to make the site in the first place, or less.
I think I would maybe disagree with that, but we can get into that a little bit more later. But I think that it's not necessarily the design and development of the site responsively. It's the due diligence you need to do afterwards, browser testing, quality assurance on different devices. You can certainly develop it responsibly for exactly what you would develop it for non-responsibly or less. Without getting too technical, you're just talking about a different approach from the beginning as far as your coding practices go. But if you want to then do your due diligence and make sure that you've tested on an iPad mini and basically a bunch of different devices, a bunch of different browsers, a bunch of different resolutions, there's an inherent cost to that. You can skip that step. You can tone that step down. But I would say that if you're doing it properly, the more devices you're testing on, you're naturally adding higher cost and introducing the opportunity for more and more issues. And that has a tendency to increase costs, despite the best of intentions and the cleanest of code.
Why don't we do one more question? I know Faye's been raising her hand, and then we'll move on to the next panelist.
Hi, Reed. You've said several times interact away from menu and interact directly, and the user interact directly with the content. What do you mean by that? Is there a website? What does it mean interact directly with the content?
Yeah, you're actually putting your hands on the content and moving things around and touching it directly rather than hitting a little link that says contact page or, movies.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and Windows 8 touch PCs are going to bring that to the PC as well. It's already happening in hospitals. I work on a system that's operated by touch. Proven.
All right, great. Thank you very much. We're going to move on to our second panelist now. And Mike is going to talk to us about responsive design.
All right, so Reed gave a really great introduction to thinking about mobile, thinking of mobile first. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about what is the difference between responsive design, this large buzzword here that's getting more traction lately, and what is actually a mobile web app. Some of what we've seen so far were web apps, some of them were responsive sites, and I kind of want to make that distinction because these are decisions that you're probably going to need to make when you actually sit down to redo your website or to create your mobile website. So what is the difference? So we're going to go through some examples here. We're going to start with mobile web because we're really talking about responsive here for the most part. But mobile web, you can really tell the difference when you go to one of these websites because they're actually two different sites. They're usually for more complicated websites or applications that have two very different experiences between the desktop version and the mobile site. So for example, if you're going onto your bank website, for example, on a desktop, you may be checking a balance, but when you go on there on your phone, you may want to take a picture of a check and submit that as a deposit. And that's something that you would really need a different experience for because they're two different concepts, they're two different ways of thinking. Generally, mobile websites over responsive, you'll have more control over look and feel because they are two different websites. On the back end, you have more control over the functionality as well. And generally speaking, the budget, time, and maintenance are less of a concern. Usually you're going to have more money to put towards one of these. It'll take more time. You'll have to maintain two different websites in many regards. Usually if you have a website that's built in something like WordPress or Drupal and you want to do something like this, or you have a server that's actually serving up all of your content, you can reuse that across your mobile and your desktop site. So if we take a look here and we compare the two, you'll notice right away the difference. If we go to a website like YouTube, for example, on your desktop machine, you type in www.youtube.com and you go there on your smartphone and it'll redirect you to a different site and it'll look completely different. If you go to YouTube right now, and this is a screenshot from yesterday, you can see that it's completely different. We've got that M subdomain at the beginning, and that really lets you know that you're on a different site. Because they are two very different experiences. When you're looking at videos on your desktop, you usually have a stronger connection. You may not be out in public trying to watch a video. You're sitting on SEPTA and you have a horrible connection. When you're on a smartphone, you really have to accommodate some of these things, like low connection speeds. You may want to look at a different range of videos instead of loading up 40 thumbnails on a page. So some of these things, some of these sites that are larger, on a bigger scale like YouTube, are a good example of when you might want to use a mobile website, a standalone mobile website. On the other hand, responsive, which we've talked about a little bit so far, this is actually when you're taking the exact same content, the exact same website, and you're reformatting it and restyling it. You're basically changing the presentation to fit the different experience or fit the different platform that you're on. It's usually really great for content sites like organizational websites, portfolio websites. If your page has a relatively low load time, that's usually great because it's going to be loading the same content that's on your desktop site. It's not redirecting you to a different page. So if you look here, our domain isn't changing. It's the same site. And if you go to time.com, you'll notice that it's actually the same content, just reconfiguring the layout and styling to accommodate this different size screen. Since we like time, we have a good example of a responsive site. We're going to keep going there. But you can see as you start to drag your browser, and in most cases this is the case, as you make it smaller or larger, you can see that the content is actually going to accommodate this. So for some of your larger screens, like your desktop monitor or your laptop, it'll have a full width view that'll show all the content. You'll see all of your ads and all the fluff and filler that you might expect on a typical newspaper website. But as you start to shrink it down on a tablet or a notebook, and eventually to a smartphone or to a smaller mobile device, you'll notice that the content is really being pared down in a way that makes sense for that device. And you can see that it's kind of hitting a full spectrum from the largest of the screens that we have here all the way down to the really small ones. So that's all great, sounds fantastic. But what is actually changing? How is it possible that you can shrink this down and actually make it effective? This is actually one of the things that isn't necessarily great about responsive design, is that you're really just manipulating the same content on the page in different ways, restyling it and refactoring it to make sense for that device. So we have this full-size version of the Time website. And as we shrink it down for the tablet version, you can see a couple of things have changed. Content's being reorganized. So we no longer have that large 3-column at the top where we have the big headline images and the stack of headlines there alongside of an ad. Our ads now move down. We have a single image for the featured section there at the bottom. Some of this subscription information at the top left has been removed. And you can notice a big change between how they do their navigation. So now that we're looking at this on a handheld touchscreen device, it's really starting to focus on the content. Instead of having those 14 links at the top there for the different sections, they're all consolidated into a single drop-down or pop-over menu. So if you were to click or touch that section's title at the top there, it would actually give you the access to that. But that's not what you want up front. It's really focusing on what's the headline, what are you going to want to look at when you go to this. And as we get even smaller, things are changing even more. So you can see that the subscription information is completely gone. We don't have the social media icons up at the top. We just have 2 links to follow and to the different apps. And our content is getting stacked in a way that creates this hierarchy of information here that really focuses on that key headline article and then stacks all the other content underneath it. So it makes sense. You're not scrolling left and right and up and diagonally. You're scrolling up and down, which makes a lot more sense and it's easier to navigate on a smartphone. So let's take a look at a couple of examples. I'm going to go back to the Time website since it works so well. And I'm just going to show you exactly what I was just showing in the PDF. Get this to get the screen here. He's calling these to a Mac. So you can see that when we have the full-size version of the Time website, as we start to shrink it, content is adapting to the size of the screen. So it's responding to this change. And you can see that this might be a tablet-sized screen. And as you get smaller, the content continues to change. So as we get down to what looks like a smartphone size, we're now down to a 1-column grid. Everything is stacked on top of each other. We've gotten rid of a lot of the fluff or the filler. And we're focusing on what is most important for users that are coming to this on their smartphone. So instead of having an ad at the top or 14 links for all the sections, we've consolidated that and just put the key information that's going to make the most sense for our users. So in this case, if we click on this, you get the full list. But it's not taking up real estate that users really want. So we're going to switch over and go to another example.
Could you scroll down on that too, just to show what else is left on the page?
So you can see here that all the content that was in the web or desktop version, a majority of it is actually still on the page. It's just stacked differently and it's arranged differently. So in this example here, the featured articles are next to each other like this, 4 by 4. And then if we look here, they're stacked 2 by 2. Majority of the same sections are here. Not sure what that block is there, but looks great. We're also able to see a lot of the images were taken out too, to make it easier to get as much information as possible without scrolling incredible amounts of real estate here. We still have our video that was on the page as well.
It's a long page.
It is a very long page.
Kind of fun to scroll on a mobile device.
Hopefully your fingers won't get tired. So we're going to take a look at another website. So we have, this is the NetSquared. So we're just going to take a look at how their website looks. And of course, if you have your smartphones out in front of you, you can take a look at them as well. But as we scroll down, or as we change the size, oh, okay. Hello. All right, so we have the full desktop version here. You can see that we have this large section on the left. We have our headline information here, advertisements. At the top, we have our navigation, social media icons. And then as we shrink this down to the smartphone size, you can see that the information changes, or the structure changes. We now have our primary navigation here at the top consolidated into this one icon, and we have all the other stuff right next to it. And you'll see that's a trend through a lot of mobile websites. And one more example I just wanted to show you. This is a little bit different in scale and size and budget. Fairly similar. We have our navigation at the top that condenses down as you change the screen size. And certain things on the page are actually removed. So if you notice, believe it or not, I can use a computer. Some of these images that may not be necessary on a mobile device are actually being removed as you get the screen size gets smaller. So as this shrinks down, it goes down to a one-column grid, and that image is removed. So those are a couple of examples. I was going to plug my website in here as well, but I figured I wouldn't do it.
Go ahead.
Yeah, why not? If anyone wants to take a look at any other examples, feel free to let me know. So we have the desktop, or the standard desktop version of the website here, and as it shrinks down, some things change on the page. Our navigation is consolidated at the top. Doesn't look as nice in Internet Explorer, but kind of expected. Nothing does, it's true. And the screen size changes, or the size of the thumbnails change accordingly. So as we get larger, we get to tablet sizes as well. And if you want to chat with me, feel free.
Okay, so let's take some questions. Are mic runners still willing to run mics? Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's try and focus on questions that Mike talked about with regard to mobile apps versus mobile design and responsiveness. And yeah.
Hi. So something that caught my eye is I love that the advertising goes away. How do advertisers feel about that? How are they? I mean, are they going to still pay for advertising if they're, as we go to these, changeable experiences? It might be that for me, the smaller experience is preferred because I don't get to be distracted by all the other stuff.
Sure. Actually, what you'll see a lot of the time, especially with Google AdWords, is that they now have a whole separate category for mobile-sized ads. So ads that actually fit or accommodate this size change. So in this example, it was just showing that one size of whatever that square was. But there are mobile-size ads that you can sell or get if you're running Google AdWords or something similar on your page.
So they'll be back.
Potentially.
It's an excellent question, though. I was talking to someone from Vox Media. Vox runs SB Nation, The Verge, Polygon, a bunch of those sites, and they're in the process of converting their sites to all be responsive, publishing sites as well. So ad revenues, their big thing, obviously. And Chris Grant, the guy I was talking to, was telling me that Polygon, which is their newest site, upwards of 40% of their traffic is coming by way of mobile already. The site's been up for less than a year. So they launched responsive, so that's great for them. But he said that their ad sales are abysmal on mobile because the conversion rates on ads are so bad on mobile right now. But to Mike's point, if you can't find a way to advertise it and sell it, it's no good. So they'll be back. They'll be better. They'll be more adaptable, let's say. So that's not the end of them, these responsive sites. But for the time being, you may have a bit more luck. But yeah, they're getting pretty good about that stuff. So.
Yeah, how much effort is it to get this markup done for, say, content that like a newspaper varies day by day? You need a whole bunch of markup squirrels, or is it all automated?
In terms of the responsive layout?
Yeah, like I'm a developer and I build these things. Would I have to tune it every day, or could I just build it once and then it would work?
Ideally, you could build it once and it would work. Not always the case. But for example, if you're running a website with a content management system and you build it to fit these templates that you might have, a lot of these examples work in that way. For the example that I showed of my website, all the news articles, the way that it's built, it's just using the same tags in the code to restructure or resize the page.
So you use templates to subtract out a lot of the difficulty on this thing?
Sort of. I mean, it's the same code underlying the same structure. You're really just reformatting or restyling it in a way that makes it look good on a mobile device. So ideally, in any situation, as long as you've styled it appropriately, it should work no matter what.
Good. Steady? You can move that on.
So I'm just wondering if all of you are working on responsive mobile sites, if you're sort of seeing emerging trends that are sort of reflecting on the desktop version, that they're built in a certain way so that when they shrink, that even though, of course, the experience is changing, but the simplification, that it's easier to do it. Because if you're just starting off with this really busy page and then you're shrinking it down, you are going to lose a lot. But if you have a home page that perhaps is a little simpler to start with, I'm just wondering if you're seeing any trends in terms of mobile reflecting, I guess, the desktop experience as well, rather than vice versa, which is obviously the desktop is pervasive, so shrinking it down. Does that make sense as a question?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure we could all think of good examples, but one that came to mind immediately for me is this website for Mapbox. And they redesigned their website in the past couple of months, mainly because they were taking this kind of mobile-centric approach to redesigning their website. And they wanted large buttons, things that would be easy to touch. It looks great on a mobile device because it's really designed from the beginning as a mobile website and then scaled up to make it look great on the desktop site too. So you can see here, looking at the desktop version, that they don't have 14 paragraphs of text. They have one line and one large button, and that's the first thing you see when you get here. And each of their content sections on the site kind of reflect what it would be like to scroll down a mobile device or on a mobile device. So this is just one example, but that is kind of a trend that we're seeing more of, is responsive dictating what desktop will be or look like.
Yeah, I think that speaks directly to actually Reed's topic, is that those of you that are here because you have an upcoming project that you're just starting from scratch, or you're going to scrap what you do have and you're going to start from scratch, are in an awesome position because you have the chance to build an effective content strategy and a site design and all of these things, starting with your mobile experience, or at the very least considering your mobile experience along with your desktop experience or your tablet experience or anything in between. Those of you that aren't doing that, those of you that are starting with an existing site and a lot of content and a legacy strategy, have maybe a tougher road ahead of you. That's not to say that it's impossible, but certainly maybe some more sacrifices and some tough decisions have to be made to make sure that you either are only cutting what you're able to cut and what's feasible, or you're finding ways to move that content around in ways that you maybe hadn't considered before as you begin this responsive redesign.
Okay, Jacques and then Mitch.
I thought there were two.
I want to for everything.
I thought there were tools that basically present the content in the proper format for the proper device out there. Am I totally off?
No. There are a lot of, if you're doing this from scratch, if you have development experience, there are a lot of frameworks out there that have responsive grid systems, like Twitter Bootstrap, for people on Twitter, created one of these frameworks. Deserve, a company out in San Francisco, I think, somewhere in California, they have a framework called Foundation, and they're both really great because with just a little bit of effort and a little bit of looking through their getting started guide, you can quickly build a responsive website without much work on your end. The learning curve for those tools or those frameworks are pretty mild. And then there are other things for WordPress, and you might be able to speak more to this, Reed, but
WordPress has, there are vendors out there who have been making frameworks for a long time, and now they're starting to, they probably for a while have been making responsive, friendly frameworks and child themes to go into them. So they'll give you basically a framework and then a bunch of different skins for different types of industries, magazines versus general interest and so forth. Studio Press and is the one that makes the Genesis framework, and then there's Thesis is another big one, but they're not, by no means are they the only ones. Startbox is another one from WebDev Studios.
Okay, Mitch was next.
Yeah, this is just a kind of a personal reaction to some of the new to a new trend in web design, as represented by Mapbox. That this sort of design where it's sort of in panels, essentially vertical panels. You scroll down as if you're on a tablet and using your thumb to fan down the page. Just as a desktop user of a website like that, I just really find it exasperating to see that sort of design where I feel it's a retreat from from 1,000 years of publication design. Where people have developed elegant ways of putting text together and relating content. Like even the Time homepage as it stands now, I think is sort of elegant in a sense, in that you have a lot of content all in one place, and you can scan without touching the screen, just looking at one screen of content and decide where you want to go, what you want to look at. I'm not sure what to do with this, but I'm seeing more and more websites that have been redesigned. Possibly WHYY, if I remember correctly, is another example where it's content poor. I may be wrong about HYY, but I want content. I want tons of content on one page, and it just exasperates me to no end to see this trend, which is perfectly fine, for the tiny screen perhaps, but I would just discourage, as a user of websites, I would discourage people from designing in the vein of Mapbox.
Right. I think the biggest thing to remember is that there's an appropriate time for this kind of design. For this example, it's very different than if the New York Times was doing something similar, because I don't think it's the appropriate medium for it. They're really displaying a portfolio of imagery, which is very different than displaying written content. And I think you really have to think about what are the users most likely going to do when they're on a desktop or if they're on a mobile device. And in most cases, for something like the Times or a newspaper, the desktop version, you want to be able to scan quickly and get as much information as possible. But on a mobile device, you're looking to get into an article, sit down on the subway and read it, and you're not really scanning through hundreds of articles at a time. You're sitting down to read the content, or maybe a couple of headline articles.
Brandon, and then let's take one more after that.
So from one designer to another, you know about the millions of different screen ratios out there. When it comes to the CSS, is there a certain recommendation for the media queries, like the different sizes you use? Like everyone knows the 320 is the magic iPhone number, but greater than that, is there certain breakpoints that you recommend, a certain number?
In my experience, what I've used a lot of like Bootstrap, and I've done custom media queries for different websites, and I've really kind of grown attached to the way that Foundation does it. And they basically anything between 320 and 768, which is the minimum size of a tablet like the iPad, or of the iPad rather. It's readjusted to look like it would on a smartphone. And then anything larger than that, up to a certain size, goes down to like a smaller grid, and then anything larger kind of fits a good or a desktop size. So it kind of is iPhone centric in that regard, but it works pretty well on a wide range of devices. There are always exceptions, but I found that to work really well.
Yeah, I'm not a designer. I wish I could, but I'll say that our designers, when we're putting together wireframes, we're going to be designing it 320, 480, 768, 1024, and then potentially 1200, depending on what we've agreed to do.
So you use 4 to 5 different breakpoints?
Yep. So you're looking at your mobile phone, you're looking at landscape and tablet, and then you're looking at a desktop. Or landscape and portrait, rather.
Let's take one more question, then move on to the third presenter.
It's a question from the cloud, from Twitter. I wonder if you can speak a little bit to the underlying code behind all of this. We've talked a lot, kind of abstract, and the design method that we would go about to accomplish this. But there are some questions on Twitter as to what is the code like under the hood, behind the scenes, how this works. If you could speak a little to CSS and just the general broad principles in layman's terms.
Sure. We were touching on it just a little bit with that last question. But if you think about this, just on the CSS, on the styling side, because that's really where the bulk of the responsive work is done, you're basically picking ranges of sizes to accommodate. So as we were saying earlier, 320 is a golden number for the iPhone because it's the smallest size for standard iPhone devices and everything. And then you create ranges up greater than or less than like 768 or 480 to fit these different sizes. A lot of what you'll see is that instead of doing pixel widths on anything, you should do everything in percentages, because then instead of saying, I want this to be 320 pixels, you can say I want this to be 100% width of the screen. So that way when the screen size changes because someone else is using an Android device that came out 2 weeks ago, it still looks good, or it still can accommodate that screen size. There are a lot of good design principles too to follow. A lot of the time when you're on a desktop or a laptop, you'll stick with a larger grid system like a 12 or a 16 column or whatever you want to do, whatever you're comfortable with. But as you get smaller onto like a tablet, you may shrink that down to 1 column or a 2 column grid like we saw on the Time site, and then eventually down to like a 1 column with some exceptions here and there for a smartphone. I'd really recommend looking at some of the frameworks like Foundation or Bootstrap, because it really makes it really clear about how these things work. And if we had more time, I'd be happy to show that. But
Reed.
In terms of a resource to really pick up on some of these things, the book Responsive Design by Ethan Marcotte, which is also, you think I work for a book of art, I don't. But also available as an ebook and as a paperback for not a lot of money. Responsive Design kind of defined all this stuff and came out with the 3 or 4 key factors of flexible images, like a flexible grid, the media queries, and the flexible images that you would use, incorporate, and gave some numbers and work through some code examples and so forth.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to Robby in our third presentation, and we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers after that.
So, sorry, what's the Twitter handle for Net Tuesdays?
PHLNET2, the number 2.
Great. All right, you guys already know all this. I apologize for the next slide. It's what they tell me to put on these things. I'm Robby Perdue. I work for O3 World. I'm actually an account strategist. I made that title up when I started at O3 World. Essentially, I work with our clients. I'm an intermediary between our clients and our designers and developers. I manage ongoing strategy and help make sure that the solutions that we design and develop meet an organization's strategic goals and fit with their culture and fit within their resources and all of those things. I work hand in hand with our project managers. So I have maybe a bit of a different take on some of these things than these guys because of our differing skill sets, but I'm going to talk primarily about some steps you can take when you're looking to implement a mobile strategy for your particular organization. So developers and designers, sorry, this part's going to be a little less interesting for you guys. The rest of you, hopefully, you'll find some value here. Mike did a great job of demoing some sites, so I won't bother with this stuff. Also, we probably don't want to talk much about Cheech these days, so we can ignore this one. These sites are just some of the responsive sites that we've built. Some of them are larger, some of them are smaller. I am going to talk about the Travis Manion Foundation because it is a cause-based organization. A little bit later, they have a newly launched responsive website that I think answers a few of the questions indirectly that have been posed so far, and I'll relate it back to a few of the questions. So I have a few steps here to think about when you're really considering doing this or considering whether this is worth it, since I know there's some hesitancy there among some folks in the audience, understandably so. First, you got to think about your needs. Categorically, you all need a mobile solution. We needed one for our agency. Every business we've ever worked with needs one. Every organization, every cause, everyone needs to consider mobile. The examples that I just breezed through, there was an e-commerce website, there was a nonprofit foundation, there was a fun site that we developed for ourselves, there was a B2B example. All of those examples required a mobile solution, and every single day, as Reed so nicely put up on the screen, every single day that need is getting greater and greater and greater. You have to have a mobile solution in mind. If you don't have one in place already, that's okay, but you have to have one in mind, and you got to start thinking about really what you need. Do you need to display every piece of content that you have on your desktop site that exists in a mobile experience? Do you have a very specific need? Earlier when we were introducing ourselves, and everyone was introducing ourselves, and we were talking about experiences that you've had with mobile. The worst experience that I've had on a mobile device accessing the web consistently is restaurant websites. They're almost uniformly bad. Awful. And that's not even because they're flash or because they have music that automatically plays or whatever. Right? It's because if I'm out, if I leave here and I want to figure out where to go grab a beer with a couple of you guys and we don't have a place in mind, I'm going to pull it up on my iPhone and I'm going to go look at their website, see if they're still open, see if they've got any specials, probably try and give them a call. There's a handful of pieces of information that I want to know in a mobile capacity that are maybe a little bit more important than big, beautiful pictures of your menu items or the history of your bartenders or whatever you might have on your website, right? So needs vary by different organizations and different scenarios altogether. So be realistic about your needs. You may need a native mobile app. There are still things, as cool as the web is and as amazing as HTML5 is, there are still things that are just better with a dedicated native application. I was listening to a talk from a guy that heads up eBay's mobile. None of us in here are eBay, obviously. Maybe you guys are, I'm not. But they were saying that they had 18 dedicated mobile apps and they have a responsive website, and some of their subsidiary sites have dedicated mobile sites in addition to their desktop. Those guys have it down, right? And they understand that specific needs require specific solutions. Think about your needs. Do you need a dedicated mobile experience? Do you need a responsive site? Do you need an app and a desktop site? Do you need some hybrid of all those things? You want to start there. And I've actually kind of telegraphed completely this next point, but think about your options. Those are your options. If you start talking to us geeks, you'll find that there are a lot of semantic discussions to be had about whether something's really responsive or is it only adaptive or all of these details. What we're talking about here is really responsive as an idea, and that is that your web presence responds to the device or the viewport that is looking at it. Technically, a responsive site isn't going to have any breakpoints. It's going to respond the whole way using percentages and variables, and none of those sites that I just whipped through are actually truly responsive, including our own. We build adaptive websites, but that's not really important, right? You need to decide what your needs are, and then choose the most appropriate option. Guys like Reed and Mike and some of the more intelligent people where I work are great resources to figure out if that's what the best option is for you. But just know that you have options. You don't have to go responsive. You don't have to go with an app. That most people realize that now, but a couple of years ago, I would say everyone thought they had to have an app, and you'd see those TV commercials for 123getyourapp.com or whatever. Hey, we'll turn your website into an app. Why? Why would you do that? That doesn't help anybody. Nobody wants to download the app to look at your website. That's silly. We've moved away from that, but in my opinion, that's something that we have seen now that our community, the folks that are kind of on the bleeding edge of this stuff, have moved away from just saying responsive is the only way. You have to have a responsive site. You don't. You have options. So work your way through them based on the needs that you have. So it's a little bit different. You have to think about your content. Denny, you brought up a great point of having all this beautiful content and this written. We had this conversation before, in fact, but all of these important things on your website that you need to get across to people. And this isn't just the text, right? This is the images. This may be video. This might be sign-up forms or tools or something else that's embedded in your website. Think about the content that you need to deliver to the people that are visiting your website. And think about the ways that they're going to access that. As you pointed out, that's a long website when you start scrolling through the New York Times, right? Think about how your content's delivered. Think about what you can do. And this, we're going to start playing buzzword bingo here, but this gets into another realm that a book apart has some fantastic stuff about called content strategy. Figuring out, to go back to more of the traditional publishing model, what do your headlines look like? What's that character count? What do your leads look like? How does that break down when your grid starts to fold in on itself if you go responsive? How many words are your articles? What resolution are your images? Are they responsive? Are you using responsive typography? Are you using an image for your background? You shouldn't. Or are you using something else that's not going to up your page weight when you're loading on mobile? All of these things, it's really inside baseball, but these are all content decisions that if you're really jumping into this for the first time, these are important questions to ask. And again, guys like this are going to be the ones that can walk you through all of those questions because, frankly, I don't know what a lot of the stuff I just said means, but I know it's important. And these guys and the other folks are going to be a lot better about that stuff. But the important thing is that you consider it. Maybe you don't need all of that content at the mobile view. Maybe you do need all of it at the tablet view. One of our clients, Five Below, when they first came to us, they had a desktop-only website. We built them a mobile-specific site that was a store finder. So you couldn't access any of their regular site content when you went to Five Below on your mobile device. But m.fivebelow.com gave you a store finder because that was both the feedback they got and the empirical evidence that we were able to pull from their analytics. When people were visiting on a mobile device, they were looking for a store a very high percentage of the time. So we built them a dedicated store finder for their mobile experience. Well, now they're public. They're getting ready to do some other exciting things, and that was no longer appropriate. They needed what is essentially a full-scale e-commerce experience at every device level. So now they have a responsive e-commerce site that you can get into a product detail page, you can go through your categories, you can access their jobs, all that stuff at every device. So think about the content and use that as part of your decision-making process as well. These next two are maybe a little less fun, but it's important, I think, that it's mentioned because there are always some fantastic questions about, give me a range, what does this cost? But we'll get to that specifically. Piggybacking off of the content angle and kind of segging away from that, those of you, Travis Manion Foundation is a small organization, nowhere near the size. Five Below is public now; they're a $1 billion company. Travis Manion Foundation has less than 20 people. They don't have the same resources that a big company does, and I don't just mean financial resources. I mean time. I mean content. I mean folks to manage the site itself. If you go with a dedicated mobile solution, as Mike mentioned earlier, you've got 2 backends to deal with now. So who's going to be able to handle all that stuff? You may have 2 backends. You got to think about your resources. You got to do some real serious soul searching and research planning here when you're looking to sell this to folks and convince them that, hey, mobile's a big deal. Maybe you gloss over this a little bit, but this is something that you really do want to think about if you're looking to be successful. You got to get your resources in order, making sure that your content is produced properly, making sure that you have the time and you have the patience to do it the right way. Because the worst thing you can do is do this wrong the first time and then have to go back and do it again and resell the whole thing, or not look your best once you have sold a solution that ends up not working the right way. Really think about your resources. The final point there is to be realistic about that. And this is really being realistic about the first 4 points in general. Again, there are differing viewpoints on how much this costs or how long it should take, and obviously that's a function of how big your organization is and how serious you want to get. Again, something like the Travis Manion Foundation, it's looking great at this resolution. Lot of, well, maybe we won't talk about that today. A lot of really great content, but they had to be realistic about what they needed. And also, as cool as it is that we can drag these windows, right, no one's ever actually going to do that. They're going to see it at one of these breakpoints unless you're showing it to them for fun. So sometimes you'll see stuff break when you do this, like that ad block that Mike showed. That's not broken, more than likely, in a mobile view. That's because it's not actually, this isn't how you view websites, by changing the viewport. But anyway, being realistic about your needs. The TMF knew that they had some specific ground that they had to cover and aggressively cut some of the other stuff out in terms of both pushing it out to phase 2 or just changing what it was that they were doing. That looks horrible. I'm really sorry. Be realistic. The fact is, in my opinion, really taking the step to put a proper mobile solution in place, whether that's an app, whether that's a dedicated mobile experience, or responsive design, it takes a little bit more thought than simply designing a new website. There are a lot of variables to consider, and there's always tomorrow to consider. Right? Things are changing every single day. CES is going on right now. Who knows what's going to come out of that? There's certainly bigger TVs, but soon there'll be another phone, or the iPad mini came out, and all of a sudden we had people knocking on our door saying, our site doesn't look good on the iPad mini. Well, of course your site doesn't look good on the iPad mini. That wasn't a thing when we built your site a year and a half ago. Be realistic about what you have available to you, what you're willing to give up, and what your needs truly are, because no matter what your time frame or your budget or anything, you can be successful here. You can get a mobile solution that really works for you, but you got to be realistic. So think about your needs, think about your different options, think about the content, think about your resources, and be realistic about all of those assumptions. That's it. I go right into questions.
Okay, thank you. We'll have some questions. Our volunteers are still volunteering. How nice. Okay, so let's start off with some questions that might be specific to Robby's presentation, but we'll drift into general questions for as long as we have them. Stan.
Wondering if anybody has paid any attention to the explosion of language that seems to be occurring here. New words, resizable. What are you using? You're using words I've never thought of before. I love it. It makes me think of going from the original browser, which was text only, and I come from a world where I was doing a lot of stuff on paper that we're still trying to do electronically, and on paper you were really locked in, and then you got into what did I call the first browser?
Mosaic.
Mosaic. There we go. Yeah, and you had text only, and you had Veronica that helped you search, and it was very interesting. But it's now the language has exploded, and we're talking about a quality of experience. Okay, and you're using the word experience rather than using. Okay, we're not using, we're experiencing. Very interesting. I don't know if that's a question or a comment.
Robby, I don't want you to be left out of my questions here.
Great.
So.
No, this is good. I've been waiting.
Okay. Well, it's funny because the whole time that you were talking, I was thinking in the back of my head, I'm thinking about, the TV, which, I mean, it's coming. There's no question about it. And then you mentioned, like, the iPad mini. So how do you plan for, from something that is whatever, however big a phone is, and they're going to, obviously, whatever it is, the iPhone, to, I don't think it takes nobody's going to be a big prognosticator to, the TV's coming, right? And maybe not everybody's going to be looking for every experience on their TV, but it's going to be there. So how does that factor in?
Sure. I'll let these guys speak to the more technical aspects, but in terms of when I'm scoping projects with clients and when we're starting to get into these sorts of discussions, responsive is kind of the short answer there, right? If you want to future-proof, which is a terrible term, your website as much as possible, then you need to be looking at doing things responsibly, but also responsively. Because depending on how you design that site, depending on where your breakpoints are, or if you're truly responsive, that's how you're going to get those, when those new form factors and those new resolutions come into play, that's how you're going to be best equipped to deal with them, right? And we still have, Apple puts out a Retina display. Awesome. Let's talk more about gigantic images. But in terms of just making sure that the nuts and bolts and the framework and the bones of your strategy are ready for whatever's down the road, frankly, they can't be completely ready, but thinking about a responsive design is the, at least right now, your best hedge against that sort of feature, I would say.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. The whole point of creating these ranges, so between 320 and 480, is because it's not just focused on the iPhone; it's focused on any device that fits that size requirement. So when something comes out like the iPad Mini, hopefully you're accounting for that. So if you're coming up with a range of sizes, and the iPad Mini fits into that, it should responsibly shrink content or fit the content because you've already prepared for it. But there's always going to be a situation where you're not prepared.
Yep.
Without that.
Other questions? Any sort?
Thank you. I have another question from Twitter. Somebody wants to know the differences between responsive and adaptive design.
Yep. You want it? Yeah. Okay. So I guess I'll start with responsive specific. First, disclaimer. Again, not a designer, so when I get back to the office tomorrow, they're going to tear me apart for the way I answer this question. But when we're talking about responsive up here, what we're talking about, again, is the idea. The idea of responding to whatever device, laptop, iPad, iPhone. One of our designers has a Galaxy Note. It's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Sorry if anybody has one. It's like a phone that's double the size of this, but not quite an iPad mini. I don't know. When we're talking about responsive, we're talking about the idea of a website or a web-based solution that responds to these various different viewpoints. Technically, responsive design, it's like when you say a word to a lawyer and it actually means something very specific in law, and you're like, no, I'm just saying that. And they're like, no, that doesn't mean what you think it means. Responsive technically means that it has no breakpoints, which is what we discussed earlier. A truly responsive website doesn't, like if you looked at when he was going through time, since my screen's apparently busted,
When he was going through time, you could see how when it hit certain points, which basically correspond to a tablet in landscape orientation, a tablet in portrait orientation, and then a mobile device, you could see things shift, right? You saw basically a new set load. That's adaptive design, technically. That is a website adapting at specific breakpoints. A truly responsive website doesn't do that. You can drag that window any direction, any way you'd like, and the images are going to scale appropriately, the text is going to scale appropriately. There's never a breakpoint, just response. Now, there are certain sites, some of ours, for example, where it's actually responsive to a point and then has a breakpoint and is adaptive beyond there. So it might be responsive from tablet on up to desktop, but as soon as you hit portrait tablet, it breaks, and it has a breakpoint and turns into an adaptive build. They're on Twitter, so I don't know if that actually helped, but...
There was a fast follow-up, but I think you may have answered it. And
okay.
I think that the point that he wanted to make was that you mentioned that responsive design will accommodate any dimension.
Sure.
But then, of course, it can't accommodate 1 by 1 pixel. You know, like you mentioned the breakpoint. Like
right.
As soon as it gets to a certain size, like there's that breakpoint.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think the thing to clarify is that it's not thinking about the pixel, it's thinking about percentages.
Yeah.
So it's never, the text is going to be 62 point or something like that. It's kind of like that Mapbox site, which is actually a true responsive website, because as you change the size, there are no breakpoints. It's always looking pretty much identical to what it is on there. It's very rare that you find truly responsive websites.
It's very hard to do.
Yeah, it's expensive. Yeah, it's incredibly difficult to do, and majority of the time you're looking at adaptive websites with responsive elements, and a lot of the frameworks I was mentioning earlier, like Bootstrap and Foundation, are that realm. So they're stopping at certain breakpoints, and then they're switching over from a pixel grid to a percentage grid, or something similar to that. That's one of the things you'll see most often.
So I have a question, just because I don't see any hands up, but one of the ones that I had is, just to preface it, I think this is perfect because what you're covering is the fact that this whole layup strategy is the critical part of a responsive design, as opposed to, let's just make something that squishes everything together and it keeps the lettering big on a phone. One of the things that I find responsive design a little bit less exciting because of is the fact that cell phones that are smartphones are really designed with the idea of being able to display a website that's not responsive beautifully. And you pinch and zoom to where you want to go, but you see the whole site or much of the site. Now, for a New York Times or a Time magazine, not as appropriate. But for a nonprofit on a budget, I was wondering if you could speak to the question of, all right, if your site works beautifully on a mobile device but is tiny until you pinch in and zoom and go to the places that you want, but it keeps that consistent user experience, how critical do you see it being to go and do an overhaul to make it responsive or adaptive, or make a mobile website, not mobile friendly, but a mobile website?
This is a really good question. One of the things that I was actually going to comment on as I was going through looking at Robby's presentation was going back to one of your questions from earlier, which is how do you figure out what content that you want to be in there? And one of the things that always resonates in my mind, because of the work that I do, is to really focus on what are the needs of the user, not what are the needs of my organization. Who are the stakeholders, and who are the people that are going to be actually using it? And your question made me think of this because pinching and zooming on a beautiful website on a smartphone may be a good solution for an organization depending on what your needs are and what the needs are of your users. I think there's always a time and place for a responsive design or a mobile website, because you can be really tailored to the content that you want to put in there or the experience, and you can modify it to fit what your needs are and what the needs are of your users. But in my opinion, if you have a really nice looking website that you don't have the budget or the time to go through and create a whole new website, or to modify that website to look really good on responsive or look good responsively, I don't see personally anything wrong with keeping it. I think there are little things you can do to make it work. like changing text size so it's a little bit larger, which the iPhone does naturally or natively, or throwing in different images depending on the display type. I don't know if anyone else has anything to say.
Well, I just would say that if you have the kind of site that does not offer a lot of interactivity, you'll get away with that longer. So, if people are simply reading things on there and they don't have an opportunity to comment or, feedback to you, then if they move around and they can read it, okay, that's what you've given them. But if you're trying to go out and get something, you want to, and they have to raise the comment box up and do this in it, the strategy won't last as long.
I think just to follow up on what they were all saying too, one of the things you need to think about is you need to think about the expectations of the audience that's going to be using your site. Because there's a couple people here who were talking about they can't stand to have to pinch and zoom. And then there's others that they wouldn't think anything any different. And I think it comes back to, again, really evaluating why you're building the site, what goals you're trying to achieve, what content you want to put on there before you make that decision. We talk about this all the time with businesses we work with. You've got to be putting any of your mobile, digital, social solutions have to be tied back to a specific objective. That's where you make those decisions.
Some of the most interesting, not research necessarily, but things that we found in this area is when we discuss these sorts of decisions up front for clients, oftentimes it is, I think Mike hit the nail on the head, it's an issue of, well, this is what's valuable to us. And us pulling up a big spreadsheet with a bunch of analytics from their website, and that might be Google Analytics, that might be heat mapping using a tool like Crazy Egg, it could be all sorts of things, and saying, we get it, but here's what the data say about what your users want. Oftentimes, those two things are in lockstep, save for a couple things here and there. Sometimes they're not at all. Sometimes they're wildly different. But I would say, particularly if you are on a budget, as we all are, and you need to figure out where to cut corners and you're looking for compromises to make, as long as you're already thinking, as you clearly are, about the mobile solution and really what the reality of that is and whether it's truly necessary or not, be prepared to go back in 3 months, 6 months, and look at your analytics, look at your traffic, play around with it a little bit. We'll see. The biggest proof I can find is when we do something like make some radical changes to content and make some radical changes to navigation in the mobile experience that really upsets some folks. There's a lot of time and effort poured into this content, and that's really valuable information. But time on site goes up by 10, 12, 15, 20%. Conversion rate goes up by the same, less typically, but more time on your site is almost always a good thing. The longer they're on your site, the more likely they are to give, to get involved, to buy, to whatever, contact. So I would say your best option there is to think a little bit further down the road and be open to some analysis after the fact, because oftentimes we're too close to the problem as folks that are in the business or in the organization, and we have a different view, and it's tough to separate that from what your users or your customers or clients or members really do value.
One point that's kind of general here, but we talk about responsive design and adaptive design and so forth. This process has to keep adapting. One of the organizational problems you're going to run into is that you're going to go in there and say, hey, we need to take that grant we just got and spend the $20,000 and buy ourselves, this hot stuff, mobile solution and everything. And everybody says, okay, all right, we'll do it. Well, but then things keep evolving. This is not going away. This is, in fact, probably going to continue faster. And so the website, whether the mobile version or the app or the desktop, whatever you have, you're going to need to keep doing that every year. And so if you're the person who advocates for this change, you're going to need to build that into the budgeting process, the thinking process, the strategic planning process, as a continuous thing, so that when the director or whoever comes to you and says, well, I thought we did the website. Well, I mean, you did it last year. You know, that was then, this is now, and you have to keep going with
it. Lamar, speak loudly. We'll wait for the mic.
Yeah, Reed made me think about a question that I would like to pose to the gentleman. Is it Robby? You deal with clients. So Reed is saying you're going to have to be responsive and change, spend money every year. And I can understand that, but your clients are asking about return on investment.
Sure.
And are they seeing it? I mean, just because the technology is changing year after year, do we really need to be spending money year after year in order to get a return? Sure. And are your clients seeing that kind of return that they need?
Sure. So, yes, our clients are seeing return on investment, but it's a little more nuanced than that. Different clients are looking for different returns on that investment. For an e-commerce client, obviously, return on investment is we're generating more sales through our website. And by providing an outlet for those sales to happen on a mobile device, we've opened up another sales channel and we're seeing more sales, and we can track that to the device. So I'm not allowed to talk about those numbers, but yes, that's happening. Whereas for someone like a cause-based organization, a return on investment for creating a mobile solution or a more robust mobile solution or diverting some of the budget to that might be a little more esoteric, right? It's a little tougher to measure if they're not accepting donations through the website or something like that. That they may see, time on site, which is something I mentioned before, has increased by X. That may be a tough sell, depending on what you're looking for out of your website and your mobile solution in general. But if you're looking for awareness, if you're an advocacy organization, if you're a cause-based organization that doesn't have a direct conversion on your website, that might be exactly what you're looking for. So yes. Now that said, across the board we see return on the investment. However, that's always at varying rates, and that's why I'm going to dovetail right back into Reed's point here. If we see something, we're never going to go into an engagement with a client and say, categorically, you're going to see X increase in whatever KPI you've set out here. We're never going to do that. But we will always, all the time, it's always built into a project, say, hey, at X months, we're going to come back and we're going to show you the analytics that we've been monitoring for you to make some informed decisions about how well this is doing and what you can change if you choose, and if you want to continue down this path and continue to enhance and change things on your website, here are some things that you may want to consider. And we'll turn this knob and move this lever and see if we can adjust those rates ever higher. But for better or worse, that's always a continual process of improvement. So, does that answer the question? Sort of. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely.
Over here.
If you don't make any qualitative commitment as to the improvement that could be expected, how do you sell the project then, if you can't make any qualitative commitment?
Sure. Another good question. So, it's about managing expectations. If you come to me and say, I have X dollars and Y website that does Z sales, or I sign up so many new members, or whatever your conversion is, right? We're always going to talk about what are your conversion points, what's the point and purpose of the website. You come to me and say, this is what I would need the website to do. Can you make it do that better? Almost always yes. But the conversation to be had around that isn't, I guarantee for every dollar spent, your conversions increase by this amount, because it's not a straight line. It's not a function that exists. It's, well, I can open up your website and right away say, per best practices, this probably isn't ideal, this isn't necessarily ideal, you say you want to project this image, but this is actually taking up the most amount of space on your website. Easy one with a lot of our B2B clients is,
you have this mission statement or value statement about your company that you think is incredibly unique and looks just like a lot of the other statements, and it has prominent placement on your homepage, and it probably shouldn't, because this heat map tells us that no one's clicking there. What do you want them to be doing? Oh, we want them to be signing up for our training course. Okay, well, that's a little button that's at the very bottom of the page. Let's talk about moving that somewhere. And then qualitatively, we can look at that a few months down the road and say, did more people click that button? If yes, excellent. How can we make even more people click that button? And if no, why not? Let's look at those same statistics and compare. And that doesn't have to be a few months down the road, obviously. With the amazing tools available today, it can be a constantly rolling process, but that's kind of how those conversations go. What metrics are you looking to improve? Here's how we suggest you improve them, and then did we get it right, yes or no?
Sure. Yeah, I missed last month's gig, which is on, what was it, Google Analytics. But I have I guess a website analytics question. Can I go to our own, or any organization we're associated with, the web analytics tool, be it Google or other, and find out what kind of devices people are? Yeah. I can do that now? Yes. That's one homework assignment. Okay. All right.
There's a whole section in Google Analytics now dedicated to mobile, so you can actually see screen size, platform, operating system.
Right.
Caveat there is, if you have a
does it tell me anything? Yeah.
If you have a Google Analytics account set up, you can see all that data for your own website.
Yeah.
But you couldn't go to o3world.com and see our data. Now, you can approximate some things with tools like compete.com and stuff like that. But
anything from cyberspace, Andrew? Yeah, one more?
Got it.
The recently tweeted question was, do you have any advice when you're shopping around or looking around for WordPress themes that that claim to be responsive? What do we look for? Is there any telltale sign that we can immediately see this isn't worth our time?
that's a layup for you.
Yeah. What I did when I wanted to check out one particular vendor was to make a local installation and see what that looked like. And then I put up a test site that on some obscure URL that I had and put some dummy content in there and looked at it on my phone. And I said, does this look okay? And I don't have an iPad. I'm one of the 3 people in North America that does not have a tablet. And I asked a couple friends to look at this URL and say, can you scroll around? Does that look all right? I just tested it. And that seemed like the real world to me.
Thank you. Sure.
Any other questions?
So, I'd also like to just mention, too, most of these sites, and it's a good point, you can just install it locally, and most of them even will have a demo button where you can just see a live preview, and you can use that to test it on your mobile phone, too, because that is the actual website.
Good point.
Last comments, questions? Okay, I want to thank our panelists for putting together a terrific presentation. Hang around, ask questions. We're going to break down, and anyone who wants to stick around and go out for a bite or a drink is welcome to do so. Invited one at a time.